What's going on, everybody? It's Nick, and for those of you that don't know, I've been running a content writing company for the better part of the last 2 years called 1 Second Copy. We were one of the first businesses in the world to use AI at a scale necessary to make a real dent in the service industry. We started way back in 2021 before ChatGPT or GPT-4 had come out, and we were using the predecessors of this technology to make a lot of money. We managed to scale this to about $90,000 a month in about 18 months or so, and the entire way that we were able to do that was by leveraging understanding of still nascent technology like large language models, AI, and that sort of thing. And the reason why I bring that up is because in my time at this business and now developing Make.com systems for other companies, I've noticed that a lot of people are using AI, but they're using it very poorly. And they're using it for maybe 10% of the total outsized result that you could realistically get using this technology if you just knew a little bit about how it worked. So what I want to do in this video is I want to show you guys how it works. I'm going to run through 4 simple ways that I use AI in Make.com to make large amounts of money on the internet. And at the end, I'm also going to run you through some technical bits about how these models work under the hood and how you can optimize them for better performance. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, stay tuned and let's get into it. Okay, so I have a Notion doc here that I'm going to link down in the video description below, and it talks a little bit about my rationale behind some of the AI model systems that I've built and some of the ways to use them that most people don't really realize. So I'll cover that in a second, and then at the end of the video I'm also going to cover what I call the technical bits, which are probably lower ROI, but they're still really important and beneficial and useful to know if you plan on using these AI models in your day-to-day. And let's be real, in the year 2024 and beyond, in order to keep or grow a job, we will all probably need to be using these technologies in some way, shape, or form. So maybe that's actually pretty high ROI too. Anywho, what I'm going to start with is I'm going to cover the various workflows that I've developed that allow me to leverage artificial intelligence. It's basically like a little helper in the cloud. Instead of me paying a human being to do some of this work, now I can just pay AI. It's about 1/100th of the amount that I would have to pay, and it does things basically instantaneously. So a lot of benefits there, and yeah, let's dive right into it. Probably the first and the simplest workflow that I'm going to start with is image analysis. Now, the reason why I bring up image analysis first is because basically nobody uses image analysis. Image analysis is an incredible feature, and because nobody's talking about it, and I'm like, what the hell, I figured I'd just start with that. I'm going to use this in the context of you running an email campaign. As you guys know, that's one of my favorite examples to bring up constantly, just because I've used it personally to generate outsized returns. And what I have over here is I basically have like a scrape from LinkedIn. I've gone into LinkedIn Sales Navigator over here, and I've pulled out a big, long search. Let's say I'm looking for just some random search consulting. Like this, and then I've fed it into a scraping platform, and there are like 5 or 10 that are out there. The one that I like to personally use is called Phantom Buster. And then basically, all you do is you just drag and drop this into this scraping function. You feed it the URL, which is up here, and then at the end of it, you get a big spreadsheet like this. I'm also using another platform called Drop Contact. That's just to enrich the data and give me some email addresses, but that's actually not the important part of this video, and you could just delete this whole thing, it wouldn't matter. The important part of the video, what I'm really curious about, is I'm curious to see whether we can gain any useful information from the profile image URL column. And what I want to do is I want to build out a brief little tool that will take as input an image from one of these columns here. I think it's just image URL. Yeah, there you go, profile image URL. And so we got a nice handsome fellow right over here. And what I want to do is I want to feed this into artificial intelligence, and then I want to have AI tell me something about the image so that I can use it to personalize the first line of an email. I want you to imagine that you receive an email that's like, hey, how's it going, Nick? I hope you're doing well. Here's this business service that I'm providing, and here's why I want you to do it. And then I want you to compare and contrast that with like, hey, how's it going, Nick? Dude, like your profile pic looks like the perfect day in the whole wide world. Also, I own a shirt just like that. My name's Peter, and I want to help you do X, Y, and Z with whatever system, right? The point is, by personalizing the email in the latter case, at minimum, you'll usually at least have a little bit more interest, or at least some curiosity behind who you are, because you've implied that you've taken the time out to like actually look through the person's profile, and you're not just copying and pasting the same response that millions of other people are. And at maximum, that sort of personality can actually substantially improve conversion rate and sort of be the dividing factor between a business that succeeds or fails. And so what we want to do is we just want to feed an image like this into AI and then have AI tell us something about the picture, and then we want to use that to personalize an email campaign. So I've actually gone ahead and I've built this. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to explain how every step of this works. In make.com, we have the action module here as the Google Sheets search rows. So if you go to add and then you type Sheets, Google Sheets is going to pop up here. Mine is not because I've already added this as a favorite. But when you select that, you'll have a big list of items that you can choose from. And then what I've selected is selected the search rows. And this is going to be the trigger to my flow. This is what's going to initiate the rest of it. What I have here is I've gone through and I've selected a spreadsheet with my specific data. And then what I'm doing here is I'm just returning one single row at a time because I just want to test this. Next, I have an OpenAI Analyze Images or Vision module. The way that you get that is you search up OpenAI. Once you find that, go up to the very top here. And this is like the first module that nobody ever uses. Select that. And then you'll have a module here where you can add a prompt that's sort of like mine. What I'm doing is I'm telling GPT-4 Vision, in this case, it's the name of the model, to analyze the image and then write a one-line email icebreaker using the following JSON format. This is interesting, and it's also very important. If you do not force the outputs to be in JSON, a lot of the time, if you're using make.com, they're much more difficult to work with, and you can't really incorporate them into the rest of your flows. And so what I always do as a design pattern is anytime I generate something with AI, I'll always feed it into a parse JSON module, and then I can use that, and I'll show you that in a second. Anywho, the actual prompt says, analyze the image and write a one-line email icebreaker using the following JSON format. I then give it an example of what I want it to do. And then I also provide an explicit 2 or 3 examples showing the sorts of tones of voice that I want it to provide, the format that I want it to stick to and that sort of thing. And I'll cover how all that works in a moment. That's part of the technical bit that I was talking about here. This is technically called few-shot prompting. But it's one of the ways that I can ensure consistency across models. Next, all you need to do is you need to supply an image URL. So I've gone here and then I've clicked image URL and then I've copied in profile image URL, which is one of the fields way down here near the bottom of this. And what this is this is basically this URL up here. And so inside of this GPT-4 module, they sort of have like a built-in image parsing module. And then for the model, I've selected GPT-4 Vision Preview, max tokens 300, temperature 0.7. I always like to pick the temperature, make the temperature lower than default because I find that the responses that are being produced by AI these days are sort of silly. And then because I have a transform as the last module in the red, I'm gonna get a warning, but I'm still just gonna run this. And what you'll see happens when we feed in the image URL is you get a result that looks like this. Icebreaker, that's a great shirt in your profile pic. Blue stripes are my go-to as well. If we look back at here, what's this handsome fellow wearing? Well, he's wearing blue stripes. And so, if you get a message like this, and if we're just not kidding ourselves here, you are probably like 5 to 10 times as likely to respond. I mean, to be fair, the base rate of you responding to any cold email is probably pretty low. So 5 times that might just be like 20% or something like that. So it's not like a guaranteed sort of thing. But having a degree of customization and basically implying that, hey, I'm a human being who actually took the time and energy out of my day to read through your profile and look at your picture, that goes a long way. Now, we have a parse JSON module right over here, which is actually taking that. And then what you can see is we've converted a JSON string, which is just a bunch of text, and then we've turned that into like a make.com key value collection pair. And so now we actually have a variable called Icebreaker that we can access the text within. And you can imagine how if you wanted to add this as part of your email flow, you might just add like an email module here. Probably the more intelligent way to do this would be you would go through and then like add this to Instantly or add this to some other cold email platform. But maybe hypothetically you just say, quick Q, and then let's just add the person's name. Quick Q, Lopez. Hey, Lopez. And then let's add a couple spaces. Now let's insert this icebreaker. Let's go. And then you would say something like, I wanted to tell you a little about ... and I'm just gonna use this as an example. And then let's go back here. I'm sending the email here. Unfortunately, I should have chosen the draft module, but whatever. I'm just gonna send it to, let's do just my base email, just so I can show you guys what this might look like. Save that puppy. We're gonna run it. Oh, sorry, I'm not signed into the right one here. Okay, we're gonna run it. Then I'm gonna go to my email address and then I'm just gonna see this live. I wanna see this as this comes in just to show you guys what sort of quality we're looking at. So you can see the text that you got. It was different, obviously, than the text we had before because AI is flexible and it comes up with its own, with different variations every time. But it was, hey, first name, that's a great selfie. Those trees make for a relaxing setting. I wanted to tell you a little bit about whatever. Now, in this case, what I might do to make this higher quality is I might go back here and then I might say that you know, make sure to explicitly reference a profile pic in your Icebreaker. The reason why is if we're sending it through email, it's probably not entirely evident what we're talking about here. So if we just say that's a great selfie, that might be construed as sort of weird. Alternatively, you can imagine how you might just send that over LinkedIn directly and saying like, you know, hey, that's a great selfie. That would probably be a lot more obvious and attributable to that fact that you're reaching out to them over LinkedIn. But this one looks a lot better. I like the striped shirt in your profile pic, makes for a great outdoor look. These 3 dots here is just a Gmail thing. If you have the same text in multiple subsequent emails, it just tries to like hide everything that's a duplicate, but just pretend that this is back over here. And then it says, I wanted to tell you about whatever the pitch is. So a very quick and easy way to, customize an email sequence based off like visual data, which basically nobody's doing. And I think that way more companies are probably going to be implementing this over the course of the next year or so. So it might make sense for you guys to get ahead of the curve and just see how you might be able to do something like that on your own. So before I forget, I'm just going to save this blueprint. Got it. And then I'm going to move on to the next flow that I have. So the very first way was image analysis. We're going to mark that as done. The second, probably most valuable way to use AI that a lot of people aren't using today is as a filter. So not only can you analyze an image using the image module, but you can also perform basically like some cognitive functioning on a set of data, and you can determine where you want that data to go. In make.com scenarios and just a lot of automations, usually you'll use either routers or you use some type of switch module to determine whether some output is X or Y, let's say. But you need to do so using procedural rules. So you need to do so using keywords or maybe some mathematical function or that sort of thing. The unfortunate thing about reality is that a lot of these decisions don't really work one-to-one with these procedural rules, right? They're a little fuzzier than that. And the cool part about AI is it allows us to basically use fuzzy logic in order to determine whether or not something is in one camp or the other. Now, if that sounds like an abstract example for you, which it was, a better one is probably what I'm about to show you in a second, which I've showed multiple times before, which people are quite interested in. But essentially, there are a lot of these request for proposal websites out there. And a request for proposal website is a website that basically just lists a bunch of people that are looking for contractors or people to bid on a job. So Upwork is a perfect example of one of these platforms. Upwork has a giant list of people basically being like, hey, I want somebody to help me with make.com and Zapier. Hey, I want somebody to help me build a treehouse for my son-in-law, right? Just a bunch of like requests for bids. And then what you do as a contractor or service professional is you'll go in there and then you will bid for that job. The issue with these platforms, I find a lot of the time, is that there's just so many jobs that it's difficult to filter out all the irrelevancy and then focus on high signal to noise. And so AI is fantastic at basically allowing you to do that with minimal issues. And what I've done here is I've actually created a flow that goes onto Upwork pretty consistently. I think this is once every hour or two. Yeah, so hour and a half. It pings a resource, which in this case is called an RSS feed. It parses the description and then it feeds it into AI. And a lot of people that have been watching my channel have been like, hey, can you break this down? Can you actually go through this exact flow in detail? And so, I mean, I've sort of done that half and half in another video, but this time I'm actually gonna focus on the AI bit. So anyway, the first part of this module here, so first of all, everything works off of an Airtable. The Airtable looks like this. We have a title column, a description column, a status column, URL column. You can click this to go to the job URL. And then a copyable message column. And these are really the 4 or 5 most important columns. I'll cover everything else in a second. But this is just one example of something that you could probably implement on a dozen or more big requests for proposal platforms where you're taking some information from the resource, adding it to a third-party data store like Google Sheets or Airtable, and then using AI to filter. So anywho, let me just stop waxing poetic. We grab the RSS feed items, we parse the description here using an HTML to text module, just because the description field is always coming in as this long HTML string, and we want to minimize the number of tokens that we're going to have to pay for, so we just want to eliminate that as much as possible. And then we feed it into basically our magical AI module. And the way that this works is we define a bunch of prompts here. The first is a system prompt, which just tells the system or tells the model how to identify. And so we're telling it to identify as an intelligent admin that filters jobs. Easy enough, right? Secondly, what we do is we define a user prompt, and then we define a bunch of examples after that user prompt. And so my user prompt is, hey, we're an operations agency that builds outreach systems, CRM systems, project management systems, no-code systems, and integrations. Below is a job description. Filter it for relevance, true or false, in JSON. Some of the platforms we use include big list of platforms. If relevant, write a short introductory icebreaker. Note, API integrations are good since we can develop them using no code. We don't develop full stack apps. We don't use Python, Telegram, WhatsApp, Facebook, Bubble, Soft, or Google Apps, scripts, or chatbots. I add that line in there because I just hate all of those platforms. We're not VAs, virtual assistants, and we don't work on very tiny projects like integrations that will take less than 10 minutes to do, or those that require extremely fast same-day or 24-hour delivery. I then also provided some example client projects that I built out for other people. And so these are meant to be social proof. These are meant to be sort of big dick projects that, get people a little bit interested or excited, like end-to-end project management for a 1 million a year copywriting agency. That is my company, 1 Second Copy, right over here. Outbound acquisition system that grew a content company from 10K a month to 90K a month in 12 months. That's sneaky, but it's also my content writing company. Monday.com CRM and project management for a recruiting company doing greater than 1 million a year. That's a client. Automated content generation system for an SEO agency doing greater than $10 million a year. That's another client. And then ClickUp CRM build for a marketing company doing $1 million a year. That's another client. So I've given it all these projects, and now that I've told it what I want it to do, that isn't enough. I actually have to go in and then I have to give it a bunch of examples. And so that's what this pattern is here, where we have a system prompt first, then we have a user prompt where we tell it what to do, and then we have a bunch of user assistant pairs. And this is sort of training the model. So I have a user pair here where I feed in basically just all of the description of the job as an example. And so I'm saying, hey, if we give you this job as an example, here's how I want you to respond. And so I feed it with an assistant prompt that says JSON, curly braces, result, false, reason. This is about writing, nothing to do with systems, icebreaker. I think if I were to be smart about this, I'd actually go and I'd put the result after the reason. It would probably improve the quality now that I'm thinking about it of the result. Yeah, and I can get into why in the technical bit in a moment. Anywho, then there's another user prompt here with another example, and then there's another output. And let's just do this consistently across this whole thing. I love make.com because I tend to, I'm always learning. And so when I go back to an older scenario or one that's been serving me well, and I read through it from top to bottom, I just see so many opportunities for improvement. Here's another prompt from user that says Airtable expert needed. And then here's how I want it to respond if the reason is true. So I'm going to go here and then delete that and then paste that over here. Good. And then here's another example. And so you can see I'm doing this quite a bit. The reason why I do this as many times as I do is because it's just worth the money that I'm spending in tokens. Realistically, it costs me a couple of cents every time that it does filtering. And then for those couple of cents, I basically just save myself, I don't know, maybe like a minute each. And so you can imagine how, this is just me and I'm more of a freelancer at this point than anything. But if you were to do this at a large enough scale and you had a lot of people working for you in a company, it probably makes sense to do this and maybe even give more examples. Anywho, at the very end, after I give it like 6 or 7 example pairs, I have a user prompt, and this is my final prompt where I just feed in the same information that I fed in before. I just do it using variables. And then I've defined max tokens as 250. I've set temperature to 0.3 because the temperature of a model is basically its randomness, and I do not want it to be very random. I want it to be deterministic and pretty simple. I'm going to cover everything and anything you need to know about temperature at the end of the video. So if you're interested in the technical bits behind that, stay tuned. And then I don't do anything for frequency penalty or presence penalty. The response format I leave as text. What I do next is I will then parse the output of the previous module, just like I did in the other scenario here. And that just makes it easy to work with. And then I go through and I will just do a bunch of tertiary sort of like text processing functions. So I'll get the budget and then I'll split it up into an hourly or a project job, and then I'll add it to my Airtable. And what I end up getting is I end up getting a couple things. So obviously I get the title, description, URL, and the rest of the fields. But then, if you remember, I also added an icebreaker. And that icebreaker I've added to an introduction field here. And the introduction field is basically me telling the AI that I want it to write a short, again, introductory icebreaker that I can use in the job application to later copy and paste into whatever the request for proposal website is. And so in this case, let's look at a good one here. I've worked on similar projects involving API integrations and automation. I'm confident I can help you with this task. It's not really the best. Maybe this one's better. Confident on the man you're looking for. He's making a comment to build automation systems for companies doing greater than $1 million a year. I understand the need for human readable documentation. Would love to help you with this. Great. So this is sort of an introduction. And then in Airtable, what I do is I set a formula field that looks like this. I feed in, so I concatenate, so that just means add text together, the introduction, and then I also have like a template that's just the same text every time. And then I just concatenate the two, I put that in a formula field. And then this now is just like a simple copy and paste sort of thing that I can do, maybe a hire of mine can do, that sort of deal. It makes it a lot easier and simpler to apply to jobs in this way. And the only way or only reason why this is doable is because I've now implemented like a filter, just do all the hard work ahead of time for me. If it identifies a job as being worthwhile, well, then it can go ahead and actually even pre-write some of the work that I would be doing otherwise. So I like to think it's a little sneaky and a pretty intelligent flow. I don't see a lot of other people doing this. Basically, I don't see anybody else doing this, aside from, I'm sure, a lot of the people that have started building it after I showed it in my Upwork video 3 weeks ago. But you know, like outside of that small little realm, very few people understand this, and I think this is probably one of the highest leverage use cases. So I would try and build filtering into any app that I'm building or any back-end workflow, however possible. One of the reasons why this is so powerful, and this is the last thing I'm going to say about this, is because artificial intelligence by nature is extremely flexible, and flexibility is both its strength and it's also its downside. If you think about it, you know, we're trying to output code reliably here. And, you know, up until very recently, and when I say very recently, I mean like literally in the last 4 or 5 months, it was very difficult to get one of these large language models to output the same code reliably. It's only very recently we've solved that. And so, you know, the flexibility in AI and its ability to do fuzzy matching and all that stuff, that's its strength, but it's also a massive downside when you want to build like an enterprise level or small business automation that's supposed to do mostly the same thing every time, right? But there's a way that you can work around that, and that's what I just showed you. Instead of using it as the end-all be-all, just use it as something that filters, and then depending on the output, whether it's A or B or left or right, you know, you can build procedural logic to take that fuzzy match functionality and then do something with it that's a lot more reliable and a lot more stable. So hopefully y'all understood that, but yeah, that's how you use filtering. The third thing that I'm going to show you guys how to do is content generation. Now, in a previous video, I've actually shown, or I've sort of revealed one of my big prompts for generating articles on the fly. And these are like quite heavy, you know, 1,500 to 2,000 word pieces, and these are very involved and they're very sort of high value. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm not going to show that because you guys just watch that other video if you want. I'm going to show how I generate proposals, and I've also shown this in a previous video, but I'm going to dive deep into what the actual prompt looks like this time. And so the way that this workflow works is basically during sales, when you're about to speak with when you are finished speaking with a prospect, we're filling out a quick little form, and that form just has a couple of questions. One of the questions in the form that the form asks you is something like, hey, what's the problem the client is suffering from? Another question the form asks you is, hey, what's the solution you want to build for this? And the really cool part about AI is you can take a very tiny bit of basically top-level human instruction, and then using AI, you can multiply it into paragraphs upon paragraphs upon paragraphs upon paragraphs. This is known as expansion, and it's like one of the key ways that content is generated using AI reliably. So what you do is you have a human provide some type of little snippet, which in my case would be a problem or a solution, and then you feed it into AI and then have it blow it up and turn it into basically like a big proposal. And so what I've done here is I have a discovery call, and so when the discovery call form gets filled out, we go to these typeform modules, which I've talked at length about in previous videos, but this is just a simple design pattern to get you in the habit of separating the trigger from basically like a testable module that you can like run whenever you want. And so we're separating the source of the data from, I guess, what's the best way to frame this that I haven't already done? It just becomes a lot easier to test because then you can always just move this here and pull data from this module instead of that module, and then just always have access to it anytime that you want on demand. You don't actually have to go out and fill out the type form. But if that doesn't make sense, let me know, and I'm more than happy to walk you guys through it. Anywho, you feed the output of that into a GPT-4 module again. And what I'm doing here, prompt-wise, is I'm saying, you're a helpful, intelligent sales assistant, which is slightly different rationale than I had previously. I'm then giving it the same pattern that I had before, where I'm doing a user prompt to give it high-level instructions, and then I'm actually just giving it a bunch of user and assistant pair examples. And so what I'm doing again is I'm saying, hey, we're an operations agency that builds out outreach systems, CRM systems, project management systems, no-code systems, integrations. Below is a loose scope. turn that scope into a high-quality proposal in JSON. Our clients are enterprise, so write in a Spartan, no-frills tone that implies intelligence. What I do after then is I basically feed it my own JavaScript object, which I am going to compile in a second. The reason why I do this is because feeding it in this format allows me to compress it a little bit. I don't have to worry about any formatting, and I think that this is just one of the many ways that you can communicate with AI. You don't have to do it this way, but I just tend to like to structure everything into code blocks as much as possible. So the input, or the example I'm providing it, is, hey, when I feed it with this code, right, which talks about some company that does X, Y, and Z, then I want you to turn that into this huge, much longer string of JSON that I'm going to use to feed into a proposal that I'm generating. I do that again here with another user prompt where I talk about, in this case, this is some real estate company, right? And, you know, a lot of these are fictional. And then I have the same thing, an assistant response over here, where I basically blow this up into a bunch of variables. There's like problem pitch 1, there's solution pitch, there's title, right? So I'm getting it to generate me a title. I'm getting it just to generate me a bunch of information based off of some small input. This is the expansion that I mentioned earlier. Feed in maybe 200 tokens and then get out like 700 in response. In this way, AI is a multiplier for human leverage and like human productivity. And then after I give it a couple examples, I then just go to the actual request, which is another user prompt, and then I say business description, whatever the business description is, problem, whatever the problem is, solution, whatever the solution is, tools, whatever the tools are. These are all questions coming from the type form, by the way, if that wasn't clear already. Anywho, then I'll feed it into JSON again, and then I'll generate milestones and timelines. And so I have a very similar flow set up here, where basically all I'm doing is I'm taking one tiny text field, which is rough timetable, which literally just says a week or 2 weeks or 5 days. And then I use it to generate a massive or a much bigger list of milestones on how that project might actually work out in practice. So maybe AI is generating a milestone for a CRM build, and I'm saying, okay, great. You know, if it's 1 week, then generate me 5 milestones, but write it intelligently and be fuzzy about it and turn that into, you know, day 1, we got project X. Day 2, we got project Y. Day 3, we have project Z. You know, that sort of thing. And so in this way, it's a very flexible sort of, and very simple way to take literally 2 words, like the number and then the word week or day, into, you know, a very detailed or supposedly detailed breakdown of what the project's going to look like in practice. Anywho, then we'll actually go and we'll send the proposal, and I'm not going to harp that to death because I think most of the alpha in here was already gained. That's the third item, and then the fourth item is scraping, which is where we can use AI to basically, you know, we pulled a bunch of text from, or we pulled a bunch of HTML, I should say, from a website, and maybe that's like, you know, like a listing website or something, like you guys probably saw in my Redfin scraper, or maybe it's somewhere else. And then instead of doing the parsing procedurally, we use AI to fuzzy match all of the text in the document, and then extract only what it is that we're interested in. And so if that sounds complicated, it's really not. Here's a very simple flow that I set up to do this. I'm starting with my website, so I'm calling an HTTP request module. You can find this by going to add, writing HTTP, and then getting this blue one with a little globe inside of it, and then clicking make a request. That'll pull up this. What you want to do is just put in the URL, click get, and then leave everything else as a default, then click OK. And then I'm just going to test this to show you guys what the output's like. You'll see we get a bunch of HTML, and where we're getting that HTML from is the actual web page that, you know, we're calling. And so in our case, it's this URL leftclick.ai, which so happens to be my awesome website service that you should definitely sign up for. But, you know, we can see a bunch of data here that's on my browser that's also represented in this page, right? Like, you know, find the perfect offer, automate your lead acquisition. You go back to the website, find the perfect offer, automate your lead acquisition. So it's the whole website, it's just an HTML form. What we can do is, we don't want to just feed this into AI to have it extract stuff, because it's just a lot of tokens and it'll probably cost us money. We want to feed it into an HTML to text parser instead. And that's basically going to take as input this super long HTML string that we just outputted from the module 4 over here, and then it's going to strip away all of those tags that we don't need and turn it just into plain text. And in that way, we're going to eliminate probably 90%, maybe not 90%, we're probably going to eliminate a fair amount of the text. So we don't have any of those tags anymore. And then what we can do is we can feed this into AI to have it scrape or extract stuff for us. And so as an example for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that I'm an SEO company. And one of my favorite things to do is run parasite campaigns on other companies. And so I have a big Google sheet with 1,000,001 websites. And all I do is I pump those websites into this flow, right? So maybe a Google sheet is the trigger here. Then I feed the URL into the get a website module. And then for every website I call, I parse the text, and then I feed it into GPT-4 with a prompt that says, hey, below is a plain text scrape from a website. I want you to extract all of the menu and navigation items and write them in this JSON format. And so I have a JSON format down here that just says navigation items, and then I have an array with just some examples, home, about, etc. And what I basically want to do is, since I'm this parasite SEO company, my whole job is I just want to scrape all of the links on the page. And maybe I could say this better. Maybe instead of saying I want to scrap all the menu items, I could just say links. But I'm just going to assume that I'm specifically interested in the navigation links. Because some websites, when you go to them, up at the top, they have nav bars. And then inside of the nav bars, there's like a nested other nav bar with like all of the links and all the service pages, right? So this is something that a lot of companies, I think, actually do. Anywho, after that, we feed into a parse JSON module, and then that's that. So let's just run through this end to end, and let me show you how powerful the extraction features can be. The output of this text is like 1,000,001. Let me see here. How many tokens or how many words? Okay, I don't know. Oh, it actually looks like there was an error, probably outputting the JSON, weirdly enough. Yeah, there was an error there. It's probably because I'm using the new model. Yeah, the new model is historically less reliable than the older model, so I'm just going to use 0613 for this. Run this again. Okay, great. Looks like that worked. So basically we took, I don't know, how much text here? We took about 1,000 or 1,200 words, and then we instantly, within 3 seconds, extracted only the items that were relevant to us, which in my case is all of the navigation item links. This might be something that would take a virtual assistant like 3 or 4 minutes per page. We can do it in under 1 second for just a few cents. And so I don't mean that you guys should be building scrapers for a living just because you can do stuff like this. I just mean that there are probably tons of workflows where you guys can break those workflows down into systems that involve scraping or pinging a resource, and then another system that might involve extracting data from that resource. And that might be enough to save your company, or maybe the company whose systems you are building, like hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, or maybe make them a bunch of money, right? A lot of options here, a lot of opportunities, and it's just for people that know how to harness and sort of leverage AI the right way. So yeah, that's that for the systems here. I wanted to front load this video with examples. What I'll do now is I'll talk a little bit about the technical bits behind artificial intelligence. And I feel confident talking about this because we've been using AI for better part of 3.5 years now, I would say. I was using it before I started 1 Second Copy. I was obviously using it while I was running 1 Second Copy, trained over 30, maybe 35 writers on how to use this technology in such a way so as to minimize our token usage, but also maximize the perceived quality of the results. So I'm very familiar with this. I also know how to build models. This is a skill that I thought I was going to have to use like 3 years ago when all of this stuff was just coming to a fore and I was starting to see the potential of this technology. So I actually went out and I learned like the math behind it. I spent 4 months locked in a little skybox in downtown Vancouver, a little shoebox apartment, just reading all about backpropagation and stuff. And I got to the point where I could build these language models. And it's given me a very in-depth understanding of, I think, some of like the more mechanistic bits that most people that might consider themselves like prompt engineers or whatever are missing. As an aside, you do not need to know how to build these things. I didn't waste my time. I'm glad that I learned how to do this, but it turns out that the moat here is not your knowledge, because anybody can learn to build this stuff within like a month or so. The moat here is access to billions of dollars of GPUs. So if I had billions of dollars of GPUs, we'd be calling this puppy GPT Nick, but I do not have billions of dollars of GPUs. So we're calling it OpenAI or whatever. Anyway, I feel very confident that these tweaks are essential, basically, if you want to be like a high-performing prompt engineer. So the first one is pound for pound. The fewer tokens that you use in a prompt, the better your model will perform, basically carte blanche. This doesn't mean that if you have a prompt earlier, like I showed you with like 10 examples, and then you have another prompt later that I showed you with 0, that the one with 0 will perform better just because there are fewer tokens. It doesn't mean you can just be like, yo, write content good, please, and then it'll do a great job. But what this does mean, if you have a prompt that's 2,000 words, and then you can find a way to keep all of the information, preserve all of the instructions in that prompt, but then cut down the word count to like 1,000, then the large language model will perform a lot better with 1,000 tokens than 2,000. And the reason why is because statistically, if you think about it, like this is a big math equation. And in autoregressive models, which is what, like the GPT family, the Claudes, the Anthropics, whatever, all these models are all autoregressive models. The way they work is basically, there's a bunch of text, and then you want to generate the next token. And in order to generate the next token, you need to look back at all of the text that's been generated and fed into it, and then perform this big mathematical equation, basically multiplying every single like numerical representation of every word and token together to get some number that can then help you evaluate the next token. It's basically what's happening under the hood. Now, because we're dropping zeros every now and then, we're rounding numbers and that sort of thing, the further on the text goes and the longer the prompt becomes, the lower quality that next token choice also gets. And so if you have a choice between two prompts, both that have the same information density, but one that's 2,000 words, another that's 1,000 words, always go with the one that's 1,000 words. Not only are you going to be saving twice as much in token costs, but you're also going to be getting a lot higher quality response. So that's one, and that's something that I think that, if the vast majority of people watching this just implemented that, your prompts would probably be better than 90% of everybody else's on the internet today. The second is the difference between few shot and then zero shot. Now, I'm looking at this example now. This isn't actually what I wanted to show you. I think this is like a special paper. Let's do this. Maybe graph? I just want to show you guys like a visual here to show you how the prediction accuracy works. Okay, yeah, that's pretty solid. This is basically like a breakdown of model performance based off the number of examples that you give the model. And so zero shot just means giving it instructions and telling it, hey, write me a poem. One shot means giving it instructions saying, hey, write me a poem, and then saying, here's an example poem. Two shot means doing that twice. Three shot means doing that 3 times. 5 shot means doing it 5 times. Few shot, in this case, just means doing it at like between 1 to maybe, 30 times in the literature. And so what you find is the performance will go up, basically, with the number of examples that you provide. You'll see that it's not always a massive performance bump. I mean, here, the accuracy on this specific task, COQA, was like maybe 5% difference. But you can imagine now if you're writing content or you're doing some like enterprise application where you're sending hundreds or thousands of responses per day, that 5% can make a really big difference to your bottom line, right? And so what I would recommend everybody here get in the habit of doing is don't just do like zero shot, don't just tell it to do something. Always add a couple of examples. Like when we were generating the proposal, for instance, we weren't just like telling it, generate a proposal based off this. We showed it, hey, if we feed this in, we want this to be the result. Then if we feed this in, we want this to be the result. Now I want you to try with my new data. And the idea is you hope that it will learn the relationship between input and output and sort of model some deeper function. So always do more than less. Let me copy this puppy in here just so we have like a visual example of what's going on. The reason the last image didn't work, by the way, is because it showed that the one-shot performance was worse than the zero-shot, and I think that was like a statistical abnormality that was only present in that model. I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that was that. So yeah, generally just add more prompts. This does go direct at odds with having a longer prompt, by the way. So there's like a fighting sort of effect between the length of the prompt going up and then that having an impact on the performance versus the number of examples going up and then having an improvement in performance. So be careful with it, obviously. The third is if you're writing content, so if you're doing some type of content generation application, always use what's called Markdown Language. If you don't know what Markdown Language is, it's pretty simple. Like, let's say that we're trying to make a Google Doc and we want the Google Doc to look like this. Heading 1, some story introduction. Heading 2, some story subheader. Heading 3, right? This is what we want our Google Doc to look like. Well, if we're using AI, and this is just the OpenAI playground, it's just a way to test the API inputs and outputs. If we're using AI and I want to write heading 1 and then I want to make it big, how do I do it? There's no lever available to pull to make that text big, right? We simply lack the ability. And so the way that you get around that is with Markdown format. Markdown format is like a universally understood format in text where if you put a hashtag to the left of a line, that just means it's a heading. And so this is a heading 1. This would be a heading 2. and this would be a heading 3. So if I wanted to just reproduce this, these two pieces of text are equivalent. Yeah, so this now is technically equivalent, just in Markdown, to this text. And the cool part about make.com is make.com offers a variety of modules. Or if I just type Markdown here, I can select a Markdown to HTML module, where I can then feed this text in here, and then run just that, and you'll see the output is now HTML. And now that we have the HTML, we can feed this into anything. We could just like feed this into a Google Doc and then use that HTML to like automatically create all of these headings if we wanted to. And so, yeah, just, you know, if you're generating text for any sort of writing purposes, just use Markdown. It's a hack that, you know, we found probably 2.5, 3 years ago to just be way more effective, because otherwise you're copy and pasting stuff. It's just not the same. If you want to like confirm this, go to markdownlivepreview.com and then just like look at text with these hashtags. If I add a hashtag here and then a space, this turns into a heading 1. And so this is basically like the HTML version of this. Yeah, so there's that. And then the last thing that I'll talk about, and this is sort of sad, very near and dear to my heart, is that modern models are, they're actually a lot lower quality in terms of output than older models. Like just in terms of the sheer intelligence of artificial intelligence, believe it or not, I would say these models were a lot smarter about a year ago to maybe a year and a half ago. And that's because what happened between a year and a half ago to now is OpenAI got very concerned, OpenAI and Anthropic Cloud, they all got very concerned about obviously the content being used for poor purposes. And you know, they wanted to sort of like restrict all of the things that could be said with these models, because they were finding that some of them were generating, you know, quote unquote toxic outputs and that sort of thing, which I understand. If you're a billion-dollar company, the last thing you want to do is get sued because you have some racist Nazi model, right? But because the way that they trained it was called reinforcement learning through human feedback, RLHF, because of the way that the RLHF was done, it's really dumbed down the quality of the outputs. And so model outputs today are just really, they all have this distinctive tone of voice, and it's all very happy-go-lucky and like, hello, I'm more than happy to assist you in a world where blah, 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 blah. Like you could see that from a mile away if you're even mildly observative, and you know that that's AI. And so that can take away some of the fun, obviously, because obviously we're trying to automate humans out of existence, right? We're automating the things that, you know, realistically should be automated, and this sort of makes it more difficult to do so. So there are a couple hacks to get around that, and the simplest and easiest hack is just to use, like if you wanted to write me a story about whales, just say use a Spartan utilitarian tone of voice. This just cuts out all that bullshit. It's going to be less interesting and less exciting, of course, but it will be logical, it'll be intelligent, it'll be very straight to the point. So in a time before man, whales ruled the oceans, vast in size, their dominance wasn't challenged, migration dictated their life north to south following the food. Now imagine if I remove this. It's going to write some happy-go-lucky bullshit. Actually, that's not that bad. Yeah, it's not that bad at all. Maybe a better example would be, write me an article about whales. Yeah, I mean, I take that back. I don't know why, but it's doing a pretty good job here. Oh, never mind. It's, yeah, I guess because of my increased temperature, it's just devolved into absolute bonkers bullshit. Okay, I'm going to stop that here before I get myself in trouble. We generate a mini Nazi model, a Nazi whale. Okay, yeah, so that's more or less it. Those are my 4 tips. I would just encourage you to, if you're using this for some type of content generation purpose, make sure to use Markdown. Make sure to provide a couple examples of what you want. Make sure to keep the token count as low as possible and the information density of your prompt as high as possible. And then anytime that you're getting this to perform applications which you want to be logical and consistent, add a token to a prompt like Spartan or utilitarian or something like that in output. It'll substantially improve the quality of what you get. Awesome. Thanks so much for watching, guys. It was really fun to put this together. I have made a fair amount of money with artificial intelligence over the last couple of years, and I've sort of been looking for an opportunity just to talk about some of the hacks and techniques that I've built on my way up here. I'm almost done my 30-day video challenge. Just got a couple days left. If you guys have anything specific that you want me to bring up or talk about in a future video, now's your time. After I'm done the 30-day daily posting challenge, I'm still going to post on YouTube. I'm just going to dial back the volume a little bit so that I can improve the quality of every video and then make sure that the things that I'm talking about are new and exciting, and they always provide some type of value. So yeah, if you got anything that you want me to talk about specifically, leave it down below as a comment. Otherwise, like, subscribe, do all that fun YouTube stuff, and I'll catch you in the next video.